There's a moment early on in Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart where one of our heroes points at a cackling robot with angry eyebrows and, with complete and total sincerity, declares the phrase,
"Put down the Dimensionator, Nefarious!"
Yeah, that should sum up pretty much everything you need to know about Rift Apart, a game that was clearly meant to be a PS5 launch title before the world got all twisted and time began to distort into the infinite like the event horizon of a black hole. And while I genuinely love to call it my game of the year, that's not likely to be the case, but more on that momentarily. The setup is simple enough. Ratchet and Clank are living glamorous lives as heroes when the dastardly Dr. Nefarious, no really, steals and accidentally destroys a device used for crossing between parallel universes. Reality is damaged, and the three of them are trapped in an alternate dystopian dimension ruled by a brutal, weirdly familiar dictator. Ratchet and Clank then have to team up with their gender-flipped alt-universe selves to beat both villains and get home, as well as try and distract from the fact that this is basically the plot of DC's Injustice with slightly more furries in the cast. Part of the remit of a console launch title is to be visually and technologically impressive, to wow the masses with the glamour of next gen, but not to scare them away with anything too controversial or challenging. And in that regard, Ratchet and Clank serves up the intended meal. The plot is little more than a delivery system for set pieces and colourful locales, but they are good set pieces nonetheless, and very colourful locales indeed. This particular space odyssey is held together by a cast of 4, Ratchet, Clank and their dimensional counterparts, Rivet and Kit, and frankly I spent quite a lot of time wishing Ratchet would just push off and leave the rest of them to it. He's kind of a bland hero in this game, sorry to say, and doesn't have much of an arc beyond deciding whether or not he wants to meet more of the Lombax species. Fair enough, I hate family reunions too, but considering he's already met Rivet by the second act and it went fine, it seems like a bit of a non-issue. Meanwhile, Clank is pleasant enough company, if a bit lacking for things to do, so all the big character nuance and development has to sit on Rivet and Kit's backs. But that's not a problem. I was surprised by how much I liked them by the end of the game. Rivet in particular has a bouncy, tough quality that feels a lot more engaging than what Ratchet is offering, and Kit can come across as a bit needlessly whiny, but it's justified in-game as a genuine flaw that the others keep calling her out on, so I'm happy to let it slide. It's pretty clear that this is Rivet and Kit's story, that the classic heroes are only present because the franchise demands it, but I can live with that, because the new kids are earning their keep fine enough. I just hope this won't be the last time we see them. If you played the previous Ratchet and Clank game, you'll have some idea of what to expect from the gunplay here. A huge spectrum of upgradable firearms that range from ineffective gimmick blasters to unstoppable death machines, and each one clearly has its own purpose in the combat. The Headhunter deals with enemies at a distance, the Topiary Sprinkler locks them in place, and the Lightning Rod breaks the game and makes every fight humiliating. Seriously, it's a homing electric gun that paralyzes enemies, including bosses, and does sustained damage that also arcs to other foes halfway across the battlefield. I had to force myself to use anything else, because there was very little that any of Nefarious's forces could do against a sustained dose of AC current to the head, a whole platoon twitching ineffectively in place, while I just held down the trigger and waited for the inevitable victory. No, it's fun combat regardless. It's springy and responsive, dodging, bouncing, and blasting your way through foes. And the sheer range of guns on offer means there's a variety of combat experiences hardwired into the core gameplay. I also like that ammo for individual weapons tends to run dry pretty quickly, so sooner or later you'll either have to switch up tactics or make a dash for a stack of ammo crates, which helps keep things interesting and stops you getting complacent. I'm a bit more mixed on how each gun levels up individually as you use them. It's a fine idea in theory, rewarding time spent using your favourite firearms, but it means the moment I maxed out a weapon, I almost never used it again, feeling obliged to wield an unleveled gun so I wasn't throwing away all the weapon XP I was earning. Running parallel to combat, platforming is frequent and full of variety. Too much variety, frankly. You can jump, double jump, try the phantom dodge, the grappling hook, the grinding shoes, the gliding propellers, the dimensional tether, the hurl shot, the wall jump, the wall run, the magna boots, the hover boots, the better kind of hover boots, speedle, the purple dragon, and Christ alive, I can't remember my mother's face for all the extraneous variations of jump over gap that Sony is giving me here. And sometimes you just fall down the gap anyway, because choice paralysis takes you mid-trajectory, and physics grabs you before inspiration does. I don't think the best platformers do this. Look at Hollow Knight, a game with barely 4 or 5 platforming mechanics, but it works them to the bone and gets everything it can from them. Rift Apart takes a diametrically opposite approach, often just doing something new rather than digging deeper into what it already has. Hell, that might as well be the tagline for this game. I didn't notice it at first, taking my time to snuffle around for collectibles, but a colleague pointed out that if you just follow the plotline for any amount of time, you quickly notice that this story is screaming forward at a breakneck pace. Characters are introduced, contextualized, and immediately tossed away the moment we're used to them. Gorgeous new locations unfold before us, then get instantly folded back up to make room for new ones. I suppose you could argue it's more of a picaresque approach, or that it's mimicking an episodic feel to match the Saturday morning cartoons that clearly inspired it. That's not the main issue here. Let's talk about the main issue. This is what throws me every time I sit down to play Rift Apart. The game is clearly, in many ways, a technological masterclass, with gorgeous visuals and complex particle effects. It's often downright breathtaking, a feast for the senses that exhibits both the skill and imagination of the developers, with vast cosmic vistas and spectacular battles crossing time and space, and then it crashes, or freezes, or I get stuck in a wall and have to reload a checkpoint, or a white cube appears that I can't get rid of, or the frame rate has a panic attack, or the audio desyncs in a cutscene, or a major subquest gets locked off because the game didn't spawn in one of the essential items. If you only look at the Rift Apart experience as intended, what you'll get is a fun, mildly unfocused game that gives you everything you'd expect and leaves it at that. But it's quite hard to relish when it feels like I'm fighting the bugs from start to finish, and they got a lot worse as I got further in. I do want to play New Game Plus, but not quite yet, not until there's been some fixes. Call this one a B grade, maybe B plus if I'm feeling generous. A certain level of scrappiness can be charming, but it's harder to excuse in a big budget project like this one, and 3 crashes in an hour was far too scrappy to be overlooked. And yet, I do have a fondness for Rift Apart, perhaps because I do get the sense that this was a project built with love, yet was also willing to experiment and try some new things along the way. Once all the many, many bugs are fixed, this will be a pretty good family game, and a superb showcase for what the PS5 is capable of.